Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Healthy Muslim in Ramadan. We've been talking in great detail about the fact that shifa, healing, belongs only to Allah. Only Allah has the power to order and to achieve healing for a sick mind, a sick soul, or a sick body. However, we are His instruments, and the instruments that are used can be doctors, can be therapists, psychotherapists, physiotherapists, massage therapists, acupuncturists. There are a number of people who have healing traditions other than doctors. The therapists of the mind can use medicine specific for the mind, and that is part of the early tradition as well. But there is a specific group of people who call themselves spiritual healers. Their techniques as spiritual healing. We know, as Muslims, the only healer is Allah. We can pray to Allah on our own. Primitive man, hunter-gatherer man, had no hesitation in doing this. His heart was in connection with the Lord of the universe. Frequently, he lived by the sense that there was a great, powerful creator to whom he was accountable and to whom he could call when he was in trouble. So, given that we understand that, we should be thoughtful when we look at the traditions of spiritual healing. Of course, the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself healed by the application of his hands, by prayer, by very simple methods. He used medicine, and he advised people in their diet, in their life, and he could cure troubled hearts, he could cure the insane. Prophet Muhammad was a prophet, a very deep, wise and holy man with great power. Man in his sickness is weak, is vulnerable, is desperate. In his desperation, he must hold on to the rope of Allah. God is the only person through whom you can get healing. But it's tempting to want there to be an intermediary who somehow takes the place of the Prophet, peace be upon him. In the Muslim tradition through which spiritual healing is practiced today, the echoes of the Prophet are everywhere. You can see that a good spiritual healer will emphasize immediately Tawheed. Nothing can happen without the permission of Allah. Nothing. He will look carefully at the sustenance of the murid, the person who comes to him in trouble. He will advise on prayer and how to strengthen the Iman, how to help that person strengthen the knowledge that Allah is loving and merciful, and He will heal whom He wills. The tradition of Islam in terms of the prayers of the Quran, the dua, the specific dua available to the time of the Prophet, these are known. There are well-written traditions in hadith about the specific dua for different illnesses, and these are used by the spiritual healers. The names of Allah are used not only to advise the individual to pray the Asma al-Husna, to recite it, to remind himself of the immensity of Allah, but also to be able to use the names specifically for different diseases. I'm not sure of the provenance of the sunnah of that practice, but it is in wide use. The spiritual healer may advise you on diet and exercise, and looking back into the traditions of the early Muslims, you'll find exactly that advice reflected very precisely. Diet specifically. And there is huge wisdom going back to the diet of the Prophet. What we're eating now is a commercial diet, and it makes us sick. We know that the healthy food is food that looks as if it's just come off a tree or been picked from a garden or come up from a field. It is recognizable in its nature. What do we get? Stuff that's been mushed up. You don't need to mush it up. A raspberry is a raspberry. Eat it as a raspberry. You don't need to turn it into a juice. Why are people juicing everything? They can't be bothered to chew. The slowness by which nutrition gets into the body is part of its wisdom. You don't need to spend £100 on a juicer. That's not part of the wisdom by which Allah created our bodies. But all of this was known to the Prophet. All of it was part of the traditions of the Ummah. And if your spiritual healer in the 21st century today can help you understand these traditions and it's part of his healing, that's a good thing. The environment is very important, and your spiritual healer may address this. Again, look at Ibn Sina and the detailed attention he paid to the circumstance in which the individual patient found himself. What was the quality of the air? What was the temperature? How comfortable was he? Did he lie flat, or should he have a pillow? All of this was known. And your spiritual healer may reflect this, may give you instructions on how to sit, that you must stop sitting in a sofa and you may sit in a chair. This is not spiritual healing, although it comes from the traditions of the Prophet. This is good common sense. And the good common sense we've forgotten. So, by all means listen, and by all means draw from this wisdom. Then there are traditions which are slightly more different, and I think we have to look more carefully at the person who is giving you advice. You can find out for yourself what the special prayers and du'as are that you should do. It's all in the record. You don't need a healer to tell you, although his knowledge may be very good and you may be able to trust it. But what I'm starting to suggest to you is that you should be very careful before you trust someone with the spiritual knowledge of your own heart, and before you trust this person to be an intermediary between you and Allah. There are people of great wisdom, great holiness, great worth that you can trust. There are equally people who will harm you. There are people who will charge money. There are people who will, instead of aiming to make you more whole, they will humiliate you. They will suggest that your disease is your fault because you had an ultrasound, and the ultrasound obviously caused your baby to be deformed, so it's all your fault. And even though the person may know that science would contradict that, they trust the person who said it because they're a holy person. But truth belongs to Allah. How can a holy person say something that is scientifically incorrect when everything that we know of the medicine of the Prophet, even though it was forgotten, has been proved today to be correct, is absolutely right for modern knowledge about the physiology of the body. Knowledge indeed that we've forgotten but are rediscovering, and we're rediscovering its wisdom. So if you hear your healer telling you something that is not truth, be careful. I have heard healers in the spiritual tradition say that you must not have radiotherapy because it will give you cancer, it will not cure it. Up to a point, they're correct. But at least you will have had 15 years of life to get to the point where you have a radiation-induced cancer. And that's at least a benefit. Come back after the break, because these are serious issues, and I want you always to feel total trust in your physicians, whether they're ordinary doctors or whether they're spiritual doctors. Welcome back. Of course you know that the spiritual component of healing is essential. We accept Allah will cure us completely, will heal us a bit, and leave us in a weakened state. With His wisdom, we'll understand why. Or now is the time for us to die. We know that. Allah is in charge. But the tradition of spiritual healing, established at the time of the Prophet, is still practiced today. And some of these practices contain the elements of everything that was present at that time, and therefore can be used. The prayers are essential. The prayers you can do yourself. Prayers are full of specific and wise guidance. But I want to talk now about some of the more specific intermediary practices which are becoming very widespread in the Muslim community. Remember, sick people are desperate. Sick people are easily exploited. They will go anywhere for a cure. It's one of the traditions of medicine that we have to be very careful when we explain to a patient whether we're certain or not quite certain, or only 50% certain, or only 10% certain that this treatment will be of benefit to them. We're very precise so that they can make their own mind up whether they feel that the risk of the treatment is worth it. For many people, they say, thanks for that advice. Actually, I'm not going to have treatment. I'm fine as I am. And that is a wise and honourable discussion between a physician and a patient. You know, by praying to Allah, you're in perfect communication with Him. But because you're weak, you feel you want the help of somebody else. Some people will tell you that you can ring them up, they're in another country, and they will make a spiritual connection to their body, to your body, from their heart, from their spiritual heart. This can be for diagnosis, or it can be for healing. And your healer in California will say, don't worry, that lump the doctor said was cancer isn't. I can see with my spiritual imagination. Be careful. He might be right, but please don't leave the doctors. Have the biopsy they recommended. Allah has invented medicine. The Prophet said, go to doctors. He trusted the judgment of the doctors. He didn't say, I know better. He was a prophet. So be careful of spiritual healers who advise you not to take the treatments and the diagnostic processes that are available to you. Sometimes the healer will say, I can lay on hands. I can touch the part and I will heal it with prayer. The Prophet did that. Sometimes he will blow on his hands after reciting, lay on hands. The Prophet did that. Sometimes he will write in olive oil on a plate, rinse that, he will write, or in saffron. There are many traditions. He will write the name of Allah and you will drink it. He will advise lots of medicines. That's fine, they all come from the traditions. The point is, they may not have medicinal value that can be proved by scientific medicine, but if Allah wants them to work, they will work. He may encourage you to use taweez. They come from pre-Islamic times and were then deeply superstitious. But the taweez can contain either prayers written in Arabic, or they can contain rather mysterious but traditional geometric forms with different letters of Arabic, which mean different things for different situations. If Allah intends it, they may be beneficial for you. But all of this spiritual advice comes from the traditions and cannot be the direct provenance of a spiritual healer who then charges you money. The Prophet did say, when the Bedou was healed after being nasty to the companions, when the companions healed the snake bite of the Bedouin chief, and because he'd been rude to them before, he paid them with goats. The Prophet did accept the payment. But true spiritual healing is not something that can be equated with dunya or equated with any transaction of money. Even if the money is introduced as an indirect support the general maintenance of the zawiya or whatever way it might be suggested. In our time, there are saints. Allah has promised us there will always be saints on earth to protect His ummah. But sadly, there are also many false prophets. There will be many people who will confuse you. There will be people who will tell you things that are wrong, that are dangerous, that are unkind and are damaging. And because of your blind belief that somehow only that person contains the wisdom of Allah, you believe them. That is shirk. You're putting them up as equivalents to Allah. Be very careful. There are tricky people. By all means, look for a holy person. I was told when I asked somebody about how do I find a sheikh, how do I find someone who will guide me, because I'm stumbling in the dark, I'm not getting very far, I'm doing my best, Allah knows best, Allahu alim. But you know, I need a teacher. I'm practicing the piano, I've got the books, but the tunes I'm playing don't sound very good. And maybe I can get somebody who can help me. In my searchings, I've been hurt. Allahu Alim. I asked a wise person the meaning of that. He said, Allah sends you the teacher you deserve. Yeah, I agree. I wasn't at a very advanced spiritual level. And I learnt from the mistakes of trusting a charlatan. If you buy a car, you don't go to a second-hand car dealer who looks dodgy. Sorry about the word dodgy. It's an English colloquialism. But you're careful who's going to sell you the car. You have to trust this car. Your life depends on it. If you buy a car that's got faulty brakes, you'll have an accident and you might die. The person who is helping you on your spiritual path is exactly like a car salesman. You've got to know that you can trust the guidance he's giving you, the car he's giving you, that it will be a safe car to get into. Otherwise, keep in the car you've got. At least you know that one. It may clunk and sputter and stop and be somehow difficult to drive and overheat, and you have to keep putting petrol in it. Yeah, that's my sort of car, that's my spiritual life. But be very careful who you trust to advise you in your spiritual life. Pray to Allah for guidance. You will know instinctively when you meet the person because of the simplicity and peace that you feel in the presence of a holy person. You won't feel agitated, you won't feel excited, you won't feel desperate to be close to him. That's called celebrity. That's not piety. Piety is something different. I wish I'd ever been in the presence of the Prophet, peace be upon him. But those who were described a man with a face like the moon, who smiled, and when you saw him smile, you were at peace. That's who you should search for to be your spiritual guide. May Allah find him for you, and may he help you on his path, on your path to Allah.